Hi, I'm Doug Draper with Acme Distribution and the Denver Transportation Club, and I'm pleased to present our series, Supply Chain and Logistics, The Storytellers. This series is brought to you by CAP Logistics. CAP is experts in offering you customized transportation solutions for all of your needs. Please visit caplogistics.com today. All right, we got some good stories to talk about today, and I'd like to welcome our guest, Mark Lazane. He's a major with NORAD down in Colorado Springs. So, Mark, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Doug.
Thanks for coming up. So today's show is very special and relevant to the time of the season. We're going to talk a little bit about tracking Santa and what NORAD does and how all that came to be and everything else. So we're looking forward to it.
Absolutely.
Before we jump into the topic, Mark, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and kind of how you got into to the military and what you're doing now.
Sure. So I'm a major in the U.S. Air Force. It's been a winding road to get here, I guess. But I originally joined ROTC when I was in college, looking for a free way to get education paid for.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, originally I was going to be a physician's assistant, but I was scared of some of the top science and math classes I would have had to take. So switched to broadcast journalism, which was a little different.
Yeah.
And haven't really looked back. So been in about 10 years now, and I've done a lot of combat deployments. But here at NORAD, it's a little bit different for me. But I'm a public affairs officer by trade, and again I've got some training in combat photography.
Oh, cool.
So yeah. But this year I'm the NORAD Track Santa program lead, and I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, that's terrific. So we'll talk a little bit more about NORAD here in a few minutes, but let's talk about the history of tracking Santa and how it came to be, and just kind of start there.
Sure. So in 1955, it actually predates NORAD, but the Continental Air Defense Command, which was headquartered in Colorado Springs at Ent Air Force Base, the local Sears ad displayed a number where kids could call on Christmas Eve and talk to Santa.
Sears the retailer.
Sears the retailer,
okay.
Yeah. And so the number, a kid got the number, but misdialed. Instead of getting Sears and Santa, he got the Continental Air Defense Command Center.
You're kidding me.
No, it's Colonel Harry Shoup answered the phone.
Oh, my goodness.
He was the watch commander on duty, and the phone that was called the big red phone. It's kind of like when there's an emergency, that phone rings, and so obviously it doesn't ring that often. So he picked up the phone, said hello, tried to figure out what was going on.
Yeah, this isn't a setup. That really is how it happened.
That's the real story, yeah. So,
oh my gosh.
He thought it was a prank. One of his guys not on shift calling him, but it really was a kid trying to find out where Santa was. So, as a dad, he humored the kid, and he said, well, and he kind of just played along with it, I guess you could say, and thus NORAD Track Santa was born. And now it's NORAD Track Santa.
Right.
When NORAD was established 3 years later in 1958. So
that's amazing.
It is.
That's a terrific story. So let's get into we're going to talk about actually the process of tracking Santa, then we'll kind of talk a little bit how that relates to the real world nowadays. But okay, so a kid misdialed the phone, and here we are. So when things started up 3 years later, talk a little bit about the process of tracking Santa and how it's evolved a little bit.
Sure. So obviously I wasn't around for the beginning of it, but it's important to understand what NORAD does day to day, and that's kind of how we are uniquely situated to track Santa on Christmas Eve.
Okay.
So NORAD as a command exists to protect the homeland from any threats from around the world. And we do it with a variety of things. So it starts off with radars. We have what's called the Northern Warning System, and that's 47 installations strung across Alaska and northern Canada.
Okay.
And that's tracking any threats that might be coming over the poles. So the moment the radar picks up a possible threat, or on Christmas Eve, the moment Santa takes off, it switches to our satellites. And the NORAD satellite system, they're all geosynchronous orbits, which means they stay at a fixed spot above the Earth about 22,500 miles. 22,300 miles.
Okay.
That 200 miles must be extremely important.
Yeah.
But with the satellite's infrared sensors, it can track any heat signature. So for Santa, luckily with Rudolph's nose, we have a great heat signature.
Nice.
But every other day, we can track a threat we can track any launch of any projectile that might be headed to the North American continent, and we have folks at NORAD that are trained to assess those threats to see if so it could be say in Syria or somewhere in the Middle East where there's maybe an internal conflict. It could be some folks firing at each other. We can track those heat signatures and say, okay, that's probably not going to hit North America, therefore it's not a threat. But we have those assessors at NORAD that are trained to assess and identify threats that are coming.
Gotcha. So it's only related to inbound to North America.
Correct.
So you can identify a threat in Syria, but it's like, okay, we know it's out there, but that's not really our role for the purpose of NORAD.
Well, correct. And that was kind of what our focus was up until 9/11. Obviously, 9/11 changed everything for most Americans.
Sure.
And so that's when we decided, you know what, not just outward threats are a problem, but now we have an inward threat, threats emanating from the U.S. That could be a problem. And so now we have what's called Operation Noble Eagle, which is an operation to identify aircraft that could be a problem, just to try to avoid another incident like 9/11.
Right.
In Canada, NORAD is a unique command in that it's binational, which means we have Canadians and U.S. service members working side by side with the two. So my boss, General Terrence O'Shaughnessy, he reports to the Secretary of Defense and to the Minister of Defense of Canada. It's the only command like that in the world.
That is very unique.
It is. And so in Canada, for the Operation Noble Eagle mission, they use F-18 fighters. They launch usually out of Newfoundland and Labrador to protect the skies of Canada. And then in the U.S., we, of course, have F-16s, F-15s, and F-22s doing the same purpose. And we work with the FAA and the Canadian equivalent to help. The FAA monitors the airspace, and when they feel like there's a threat, then they kind of kick it over to us to kind of help investigate the threat.
Interesting.
But those same jet fighters on Christmas Eve, of course, escort Santa all over Canada and the United States to make sure he gets there safely. Now, obviously, Santa flies much faster than us,
right.
But he'll slow down a little bit, let us help him out. And all of those systems, the radars, the satellites, and the jet fighters, is how not only do we protect North America, but also how we help track Santa around the world on his journey on December 24th.
That's great. That's a good story for sure. What's it like with the partnership? I'm going to jump a little bit to the partnership between U.S. and Canada, because that is definitely unique. You think of the nationalism in the U.S. Armed Forces, but yet here's a very important aspect here in our own backyards in Colorado, and there's this amazing partnership. Talk about that. Like, how did it form, and does it work? You always think that.
Sure. Well, Canada and the U.S., obviously, when it was formed in 1958, they had a joint reason to be concerned about outside threats. And so between Alaska and Canada, obviously that covers most of the poles for North America. Excuse me. And so they're able to, it makes sense for them to work together, as threats can come from anywhere along there. We want to make sure that we are lockstep with Canada, and the military relationship has never been stronger. We're celebrating our 60th year of NORAD this year, and the 63rd year of NORAD Track Santa. But it's seamless. We have in every office inside NORAD headquarters, you have a Canadian sitting next to a U.S. person doing the same job, without any problems. You take an order from a Canadian service member or a U.S. service member, it's executed in the same exact manner.
Yeah, that was my next question. Is you're in Cheyenne Mountain, is there literally a Canadian citizen sitting
Absolutely.
right next to you?
Absolutely.
So there's two different citizens in the same place. Is it two different systems?
Nope. So we're seamless operations. We have the same same network, same systems, and we work together. We have a U.S. 4-star general as the commander, and then he has a U.S. 3-star deputy as well as a Canadian 3-star deputy that both report to him, and then we work for all of them, obviously.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's really good. Let's. I was saying before the show that we try to cover technology in all of our discussions related to logistics and supply chain. So let's talk a little bit about the technology and how you actually track Santa, and then obviously that's related to real world outside of the 24th of December. You mentioned something about 27 outposts. So tell me about that. Is that a manned station, or is it just something in the middle of the field?
So 47 installations, and some are manned. We have military bases up there, but then some are radar sites that we controlled by computers, and then people will go there and do maintenance and upgrade them, on occasion. But yeah, they're really they're all an interconnected network, and they call that the North Warning System. And so they kind of talk to each other, and we have folks here at our headquarters and our other military installations that are tracking those systems, and then when the threat's identified, reacting to those. And that's really our first warning that there might be something amiss in the head toward North America.
So those 47 outposts, is that Canadian technology? Is it U.S. technology? And if something goes wrong, it's in the middle of not Siberia, but in the middle of a province in Canada, and
Sure.
it fails. Like, who's responsible for that?
Yeah, so we have a lot of redundant systems, obviously. Obviously, you're working, logistically, you're working with some major hurdles, right? You've got weather, transportation, and then just manpower. Canada is quite large, especially those northern territories where there's not a lot of civilization. So they have a system in place where they do routine maintenance on them, and because they're redundant, if you take one down, you still have coverage because of the other systems. But yeah, if something does go down, they send teams out to that location, fly them up there and or drive them up there or boat them up there or however we need to do it to get them in a position to get those systems back up and running. But it's a huge logistical challenge, as you can imagine. Yeah,
trying to get it apart. I know Cap Logistics, our sponsor, really does a lot of that. Like, hey, something is down and it needs to be, a part needs to be there now.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure that's what you run into quite a...
Absolutely.
Have you ever been to one of the outposts before?
I haven't. I went to Alaska this year, and I went to Winnipeg, Canada, which obviously is much further south in Canada. It's almost just about not too far away from North Dakota. But I haven't been to one of those outposts. I know we have guys there, and I know they're working hard. But fortunately or unfortunately, depending on the weather, I have not been able to get to any of those spots yet. I hope to. I would love to see it.
Fortunately, this time of year, not fortunately when it's fishing season. Right?
Those are your words, not mine.
I like it. So if we can dive in a little bit more into the technology, and you can go as deep as you can with security type stuff. But let's say that there's a threat, right? So Santa's done, and it's December 26th, and he made it home safely, and there's kids happy all over the world. So there's a threat that comes in over the pole, and it's identified by one of the outposts. What happens then? And what do you guys do? Just alert you and then you alert others? Or what's the reaction whenever you find a threat that's coming over?
Yeah, so we have a command center that's open, operating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So those systems would come back with, hey, you might want to check out this, and so really we mix technology with people, and the people we have in our operations center are networked in by conference calls and email and quick chat with folks in Alaska. We have a big continental air defense down in Florida, and they can kind of talk to each other. What are you seeing? What are your capabilities if there is a response? And it's seamless and it's almost automatic, and they train for that every single day. Literally, they have training events throughout the day, regardless of what crew you're on. And so when those threats would come over, the right folks, it basically becomes a briefing. They give what the information they have, and then the person that's there, an assessor, is there to make a decision on, is this a threat and what should we do about it at that point.
Gotcha. Is there any missile launches or anything, or are you just identifying the threat and then passing it on, or is there any technology up there that you're responding in a aggressive fashion to knock that out of the sky or whatever the threat is?
Sure. So the response actually falls on U.S. Northern Command, which is co-located with NORAD, and then the same folks that are able to assess the threats are authorized to do countermeasures as necessary. Now, we've never done that, but we have trained for it and we are ready to do it. But that would fall on U.S. Northern Command to launch anything that would need to be a counter. And then we will launch, if we did have a threat that was airborne, some type of plane or airborne vehicle, we would definitely, we have the jet fighters in Canada and the U.S. That will launch and go up and investigate and have the means to intervene if necessary.
If you have to launch a fighter, would it be launched from Colorado Springs since you're not headquartered there, but based there? Or would they be deployed from a different base? Yeah,
so it's more hub and spoke. Colorado Springs is definitely the nerve center, but we have fighter jets on alert all over the U.S. and Canada at any given time. It varies depending on what's going on. But there's always somebody available to respond. I just can't give you all the locations because there's a lot of them. So
yeah,
we'd be here for the rest of the time.
Yeah, no problem. So one thing that caught my attention was the training piece of it.
Sure.
Right. So you say every day. So sometime today there's going to be a training exercise that happens related to a threat.
Absolutely. They'll pick a variety of threats and a variety of different situations. And we have a whole department within NORAD that's dedicated just to training up those folks that do those responses. And I guess they literally train every single day to a variety of threats because we never know what might be next,
Yeah. Interesting. Why was Colorado Springs selected? I was just looking at some
Sure.
notes and just questions that literally I was talking to my kids about it this morning. They're like, you got to ask this question. So you're going to get a couple of them.
No, that's great. So Colorado Springs was selected for several reasons. One, they wanted something in the continental U.S. Because if there was a threat coming over the poles or from the coast, the closer to the middle of the country you are, the longer you have to respond to the threat before it's here. They chose Colorado specifically because it had so much of a military presence. Camp Carson, which is now Fort Carson. The Air Force Academy was under construction at the time. And then Schriever Air Force Base and Pete Field were all in existence. And so they were chosen because they already had a strong military community to fall on to build this new command. And then specifically, Colorado Springs was chosen because of they were looking to build, obviously, inside a mountain, and to do that again logistically is a challenge. So the Colorado Springs isn't known for a lot of seismic activity, and then particularly the mountains around Colorado Springs aren't known to be very wet inside to have underground lakes and that type of thing.
Interesting.
So that's why specifically they were chosen.
Huh. How long did it take to build NORAD? We want to be in that mountain, start digging.
Sure, yeah. It only took about 5 years, actually. And really, to build inside Cheyenne Mountain was a great feat of engineering and architecture, but very rapid pace for what they were trying to accomplish. They took out, I think it was about 400 tons of granite outside the middle of the mountain, and that made the parking lot and the approaches and things like that. And then operational control was about 5 years.
That's amazing. That's
fast.
That's a fast turn even nowadays with the technology would have to do that.
Absolutely. And I don't know if we may not be able to do it, so fast today. Obviously that was a different time, but they were able to do a lot of things. And really, when they were building the mountain, they were kind of inventing things as they went along because it hadn't been tried before, right? So they were kind of like thinking, how can we make this structure stand forever?
Right. So did it work? Have they had to make upgrades, or like, oh, we did this and it worked for a while, but now we need to improve?
No, it works remarkably well. I mean, the mountain itself was built a little after NORAD was established, but here we are over 50 years later, and it's still standing strong and being used every day by about 400 to 800 people daily, and it can obviously plus up to a lot more.
Wow. Yeah. So give us just a quick minute or so. Tell us, what does it look like in there? Right, we're kind of geeking out a little bit about Cheyenne Mountain.
Sure, and people have seen movies that have tried to recreate it, right? So everyone feels like they know what it looks like. But really, once you're inside the mountain itself, the command center looks similar to the command center we have at Peterson, right? You're going to have, but it was built a lot like a Navy ship. A lot of so it's not one cave. It's several structures, all linked together by catwalks, basically. I think there's 14 buildings between 2 and 3 stories tall, and so it really does feel a lot like inside a Navy ship if anyone's ever been on one of those. Straight hallways, made of metal, and then every hallway kind of looks the same, so you got to really know where you're going inside the mountain.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Any cool facts about inside there? I've heard that it's built on springs for seismic activity.
Absolutely. 1,319 springs are inside the mountain, and that's for that seismic activity. It's about a foot of clearance on all sides, and that's in case of an explosion or an earthquake, that it doesn't, you don't want a solid structure hitting against another solid structure. That's probably where problems happen. So the springs actually absorb the shock of any of those waves, and it also serves as a wedge against electromagnetic pulse as well.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, ground. It's a ground. It serves as a grounding for the facility as well. The springs do.
Right, that's amazing.
Absolutely.
So when was the last time you were in NORAD?
So NORAD itself, as a headquarters, is on Peterson Air Force
in
Base.
Cheyenne Mountain,
So I'm there
I should
every
say.
day.
Yeah,
but
thank you.
No problem. But Cheyenne Mountain Air Force Station, which is what people assume is NORAD. I was there about 6 weeks ago for the last time.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's great. I love going up there. It is truly, a new world and just a marveling, an engineering feat.
Yeah.
It marvels me when I go inside there and think, 50-something years ago, the forward thinking that went into making this facility viable today is just amazing.
Yeah. Is there anything else that the U.S. military has that would be comparable to NORAD in other parts of the country or the world?
Not to my knowledge. Of course, I'm not high enough in the food chain yet to know everything, I guess. But to my knowledge, it's the biggest structure of its kind, and really the only structure of its kind that I'm aware of.
Right. Interesting. Is there any specific examples that you could talk about related to training and how everything worked, where the Canadian, the partnership is amazing to me
Sure.
because it just doesn't exist outside,
Sure.
especially in the military. Is there any examples or any stories you could tell us about how the partnership worked with the U.S. and the Canadian being together?
So again, it's been going on for so long that it wouldn't be weird to us there at the command, right? Because we're used to seeing the U.S. and the Canadians together every day.
Yeah.
I can tell you that obviously there's politics involved in everything, America seems to do. But on the military side, the relationship between the U.S. and Canada has never been stronger. A lot of the Canadian military is much smaller than the U.S. military, but we, a lot of them go through NORAD at some point in their career, and so it kind of builds those bonds that kind of strengthen the two countries' military connections, forever. And events like, planning for something like the next 9/11 or something like that would, just continues to forge us together because we have a shared interest in protecting this homeland, whether it's on the U.S. or the Canadian side of the border.
Right. Being North American, has the country of Mexico been involved at all, or what's the
the U.S.
with that?
Exactly. So we have a great a strong connection with Mexico through U.S. Northern Command. We have liaisons between the two countries. In fact, we have a couple of Mexican military members that actually reside in our headquarters as liaison officers.
Got it.
And we continue to build, work with training and communication between the two countries is really strong. So we have a great relationship with Mexico. Our commander's been to Mexico and been with their Minister of Defense several times, and we continue to build that relationship.
Gotcha. So did you say that there are Mexican citizens that are in there as well?
We have some Mexican military members that actually are liaison officers. They're at Northcom headquarters, and their bosses are back in Mexico, and that's how we share information back and forth between the two countries. And we also work with the Mexican embassy, especially the consul here in Denver, for those types of political affairs that we need that they might need help with.
Yeah. Very interesting. So we'll kind of wrap up and kind of bring it full circle with with Santa, because that's kind of why we're here. So tell us what the kids should expect this go around.
Absolutely. So it starts off really December 1st. Our website was put out, and it's been going strong. But on the 24th of December, we really kind of kick it up a notch, and you can call in at 1-877-HI-NORAD, and that gets you a person that can answer the phone and tell you exactly where Santa is.
Really?
Exactly. You can go to our website or our app. You can do the same thing. If you have OnStar, you can hit the OnStar button, and they'll tell you where NORAD is. Amazon Alexa can do the same thing.
You're kidding.
No, all these features are in place. Verizon will have a text message service. You can text to Verizon itself, and it'll spit back with where Santa is. So all these cool technologies that we're able to incorporate, not just for the holiday cheer, but to kind of help explain to everyone what NORAD is and how we're protecting the homeland.
Yeah, that's really important, and it's all volunteers, right? That was
all
one
volunteers. About 1,600 volunteers man the call center to take about 200,000 calls. We hope this year.
Oh my goodness! And that all happens in one night.
About 20 hours. Yep.
Oh man,
20 sleepless hours.
And you'll be right there front and center, right?
Absolutely.
That's terrific. Well, that's great. We could talk a lot more about the Santa Tracker, but it was really good to have you on the show and learn a little bit more about NORAD and what goes on down in Cheyenne Mountain. So thank you very much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, Doug. Appreciate it.
And thank you for joining us on the Connect and Collaborate Network, featuring the supply chain logistics, the Storytellers, which has been brought to you by CAP Logistics. Again, thanks a lot and have a good holiday.
You too. Thank you.